Hey, listen to us, and we will deliver to you pearls of wisdom. Deal?
Hello and welcome to the show, Colourful Conversations with Mark and Pete. This is the show dedicated to religion, politics and business. This week, Clergyman Pete and Business Mark debate how to do a deal. Yes, folks, as you probably gathered at the beginning of this show, Clergyman Pete is ready to do a deal with you. So listeners, what could that be? Well, look, we're going to pour out pearls of wisdom, which will cover everything from how to do deals in business and many other tips in life. Now, at this moment in time, Clergyman Pete, I'm going to do a deal with you. Let's start with one particular topic. Many people are doing many deals throughout society, but why is it that many people are doing deals with the devil?
Yeah, well, this is an interesting idea of doing a deal with the devil. I mean, you probably quote that wonderful piece of scripture. Oh, no, the Christopher song, about playing cards with the devil and seeing who can win. There is no way you can do a deal with the devil. In fact, that idea is that you can somehow use evil means to have good ends. That can't be true. And a real deal can't be that. It can't involve doing things in the wrong way, because in the end, the deal will fall apart. Either the deal itself or it will fall apart because you will be compromised. But I mean, you've got to be able to do deals properly. I don't think you can actually live life well being unable to compromise. And I think that's the heart of being able to do a deal, is to be able to compromise. I give up something to get something from you, and the result is not ideal for both of you, but it's better than having no deal. That's the key, I think. But you, as a businessman, you're the businessman on this show. You must have experience of doing deals. How do you go about it? What's your pearls of wisdom?
Well,
cast them before this swine.
Absolutely. Oh, indeed. Well, I know that we're going to talk on different levels, and we're going to refer to some people who have been doing deals for many years, whether it be politicians or eminent business people, or possibly someone in particular who's been both. But here's just a little thought about how to do a deal. So I thought I'd sort of start the theme with a little poem called, How to Do a Deal. The best way to do a deal is to get down on one knee and then stare hard with nerves of steel and wait patiently. Now, if your offer is not ideal, consider a dramatic plea by grovelling from each heel as they rub their hands with glee. Simply show them how you feel, punch them with a swift 1, 2, 3, then ensure you hear them loudly squeal, then get up and quickly flee. Maybe, possibly, that isn't the best way to do a deal. I don't know. I mean, maybe that has worked in the past, but possibly some serious guidance is required here.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well,
is that a method that you used?
Well, no. I mean, I think I see doing a deal as more of it's more like a proper relationship, in that without the relationship, a deal won't work. With the deal, you build a relationship. So I think the two are related. And if it's one person with all the power, it's not going to work. So come on, then you've probably done lots of
let's get to the
deals where you've tricked people out of money in your line as a businessman, isn't that right? I mean, where you've made very good deals.
Well,
that's what I meant to say.
Well, indeed. But let's get to the seriousness of this. So, folks, the swift 1, 2, 3 in the solar plexus is not a good idea, unless, of course, your business happened to be boxing. But the likelihood is it probably won't. Now, the key thing here is to understand your audience. Point one. And the reason I say that is that that's absolutely critical, because just coming to the table, talking about your products and services and price is not enough. You have to understand where you can add value. Now, although seems like an obvious point, what I have noticed, particularly in sales when doing a deal, many people will often come to the table talking about price and products alone. Well, most customers will know that you offer prices and you will have to come to a deal at the end. But if the art of the deal is going to succeed, you've got to show to your customer that you understand your customer's business. So one of the key things and a golden rule is understand the client's problem. Now, I would imagine that if I take another analogy, a little bit perhaps when you're doing a deal with perhaps one of your parishioners, if you're trying to sort of educate them about Christianity, it's understanding their problem. So let's just sort of explore that a little bit. I mean, surely that's one of the challenges that you face, I would have thought, in your profession.
Yes, I think that the relationship between say a clergyman or a minister and the people in the parish is at one level, but even then there's a negotiation that happens with you have a particular position in within their worldview, and depends how they view you. But between people in the parish, people being able to get on together and form proper relationships is absolutely vital. Now, if they're able to do that, one thing that you notice is they must have managed to make some sort of deal, because people's needs, people's requirements cannot perfectly coincide at any point. So you know that if someone's able to get on well, say the sort of person, oh yes, this person gets on well with people, actually there's a skill involved. It may be a natural skill. It may be something that they do naturally, is what I mean to say, but they still have been making deals with people, making compromises to work forward. So yeah, I think when you're trying to form any sort of community, the encouragement to make effective deals is not really, you might not call them deals, but the encouragement to make deals or to make compromises in order to get ahead is not some sort of giving way. It's not aiming for something of a lower standard. It's rather aiming for the highest possible standard. Having agreed that not everyone's needs can possibly coincide, the highest possible standard is to have as many people as possible at being able to function, to be able to be valued in that community.
Now, the important point is about relationships, because this is the other thing. So understanding somebody's problem is one thing, but understanding the person is another. So you may have to deal with more than one individual, but that's the skill of networking. That's the skill of understanding the individual. Now, this is absolutely crucial, because sometimes doing a deal may not be quick. It may take a long time. Some deals will be quick, and you will seize upon those because you have an opportunity where you can provide a product or a service that no one else can, and in which case you're in a commanding position. But the chances are you have got strong competition, and your client is probably going to be benchmarking you. And I think that the critical thing is to build that relationship. Trust, I think, is another thing. And one of the things, particularly in business, is that you might get a deal in the short term. Now, Mark and Pete have for many, many years now talked about the importance of having a long-term view, because doing a quick deal is one thing. And perhaps you might win the sale, but if a customer's not happy because perhaps they've been sold the wrong product or maybe tied into the wrong deal, it's not going to bode well for the future. No. So having a long-term deal is something that certainly a lot of people will relate to. So one of the classic things that a lot of salespeople have is their little black book, which will be full of their contacts and the people that they've nurtured deals with and they've had relationships with, where they've gained trust because they know that that person is providing products and services to meet their needs and in the interest of the company. So certainly relationships is very, very important. The other one, which again, not in any particular order, but of course, definitely think about your competition, think about your market, think about the context in which you're dealing with. Things happen at pace. And I think that even for clergyman Pete, I mean, he's seen such a dramatic change in society over the last 10 years. Same too as in business. Things change so quickly that you need to keep pace with things. So having your finger on the pulse is definitely one of those things. Now, there's something else which I would like to point out, which I'm sure I'll be interested to see how this works in the religious world, but in a business world, anticipation is very, very important. Now, what do I mean by that? So, anticipation is such that understanding where businesses are going, the way possibly even technology is going, or certainly that there are trends, because what that does is it means that you can build your services and your products in line with the way that your customers are actually evolving. So I think that is absolutely crucial. So that I'm going to turn it to you, Clergyman Pete, which is how do you anticipate the way you deal with your parishioners in line with the current cultural trends that we're seeing at the moment?
Well, the way that the idea of doing a deal comes into this is by dealing with people, I think, with integrity. I would say is to you in trying to come to a deal have a certain thing in mind that you would like to work out. Like, for example, when I'm approaching someone, maybe they come from a completely different cultural background, but I'm trying to draw them maybe into behaving in a different way, maybe coming to church, maybe donating to a particular cause, maybe helping out by volunteering, whatever it is. What I want to do is do a deal with them. Now, by doing a deal, of course, there is some sort of compromise. Now, some people say, well, how can that be the case that you're saying that? But certainly if you're not God, but you're using the Bible, so therefore you're trying to speak for God, how can you do a deal with God? But in fact, God says exactly that, to do a deal with him. Isaiah 1 verse 18 is the clearest time that he says this. He says, "Come now and let us reason together, says the Lord. Although your sins are as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they're red like crimson, they shall be as white as wool." And this idea of reasoning with God is interesting. So what he's saying is, let's reason, let's see what position you're in. You can see what I have to offer, and you will see when we actually discuss things, says God to you, that if we do a deal, of course, in this case, if you do a deal, you'll see that the person has nothing to offer and God has everything to offer. But that's what that is showing showing the hand, showing what the benefits are. You see, God gets something out of it. What does he get? He gets, because his love is such that he doesn't want to get anything out of you other than your love for him. You have needs, he's willing to provide them. So therefore, together, you come to this deal, and that's very specific for God. But when I look at this, I say, well, even God wants to reason with people, wants to talk with them, and come to to the best deal possible. When you're reasoning with God, it's very different from reasoning with me, trying to form a community that worship God together. But that points the way. It shows that I can, with all integrity, try and arrive at a deal. So when I'm approaching someone who I'm saying, well, this is the outcome I would like. First of all, is to aim at working with justice. Psalm 112 verse 15. Good will come to those who are generous and lend freely, who conduct their affairs with justice. So if I'm generous, like God is generous, then I have a possibility of ending up with a good outcome. So if I'm being generous, I'm encouraging the other person to be generous. That's the milieu in which we are having our discussions. And so finally, what that means is taking this biblical principle of being generous, of having integrity yourself, and of caring for the outcome of the other person. Philippians 2 verse 3 say, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition, but have humility and value others above yourselves." Having these ideas in mind, valuing the others, being generous to the other, but behaving with integrity, we can together aim at the best possible outcome. So just finally, so an example would be, I had someone come into church who was acting out, as in had some sort of mental problem. I won't go into the details, so you can't, if anyone's listening from my neck of the woods, they can't identify them. But this person had been behaving in this acting out, so behaving in a way that was affecting the running of the church. And I wanted them to behave differently. So what I did was I talked to them, said the outcome that I wanted. We talked about what they could get out of it, what I could give them in order to give them a sense that they're offering something to me rather than me just demanding. So I say, well, if you would do this, this would help. They offer to do something for me. I offer to do something for them. Together, doing that, we build a relationship. And then I'm in the position to say, and as part of this, don't do that stupid thing that ruined everything without saying what it was.
Mm.
Doing a deal is not something that you should be seen as compromising your integrity. The compromises are within the doing the deal. It's not to do with your integrity. You keep that intact.
Yes. Well, I mean, certainly one point that you've raised here, which is about where there is perhaps some give and take, compromise, some people might say. Now, the one thing that I will say in business, which is it's probably slightly different to what you've talked about here, because we've got a very emotive subject when we're talking about religion and people's feelings, etc. In business, it's a little bit more calculated. And the one advice I would say is you've got to know when to walk away. Now, the reason I say that is, remember, commerce is very different. And this is something which primarily is much more structured and it works on a different level. But the reason I say that is that typically when you're doing a deal, there is a point where you will know where you can compromise. You'll know where you've reached your level, perhaps in the negotiation, where you're either going to put your company either in a situation where you might make a loss. Now, some people might actually say, well, that could be a good thing in some ways because you're effectively building your experience and that's like an investment. But generally, the point here is that whenever you're doing a deal, there's know when to walk away. But the other thing is, and I'm just going to turn to perhaps someone we all know and love in the world who's crossed over from the business world and perhaps gone into politics. Now, this is a simple quote from an individual who once said, I like thinking big. I always have. To me, it's very simple. If you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't get much bigger than one individual, such as Donald J. Trump. Yes, this was a man who was noted throughout the 1980s and 1990s and going into the 21st century as an entrepreneur who has succeeded, although he'd had his failures. But the point being is thought big. So one of the key themes, which he actually encapsulated in a book that he wrote, which is called Trump, The Art of the Deal. Now, here he effectively outlines the way he runs his life, and I think that the people he has. So one of the other points about having a deal, and this is quite a simple point, and if you look at the way that Donald Trump has succeeded, it's not just about the man himself, it's about the people you surround yourself with, i.e. whether that's friends, family, business advisors, etc. If you choose your people correctly, then the chances are you are going to succeed. Now, some people may say, well, I've always thought that some of the associates with Donald Trump were not particularly great. But let's be honest, he still is a successful person.
Yes.
And whether you like his politics or not, he is the president. He has succeeded in that way. He's still, incidentally, a successful businessman. And of course, you have to then say, why is it that he is successful? Whether you like him as an individual, whether you would like his rhetoric, whether you even like the business that he's in, is immaterial. The point is, it's about making decisions. So one of the other points of key as well, timing of a decision, the ability to make the right decision and to make the right decision with the right people. So if we look at Donald Trump, now, he has to be seen as a success. Whether some people like the fact that he's become successful is a different matter. But if we get your thoughts on that, Clergyman, what do you think of somebody like Donald Trump?
Well, I'm not sure that there are that many people quite like Donald Trump. But yeah, I think that in terms of his personality, I guess there's cultural differences between Britain and America, and then there's cultural differences within America. But to me, he seems extremely brash and irritating, and I probably wouldn't like him individually. From a distance, I think, he has his points. He's sometimes quite amusing. But he I think, is effective in using a technique to bring a deal about, which is sometimes called persuasion. Yes. He
Yes.
even though you think he's not being that intelligent, you think he's saying random things, but he's saying things to get you to think in a different way. So he's behaving
Yes.
or saying something that is going to prompt you to do what he wants, which of course I say of course, but one assumes that he, as president of the United States, thinks is best for the people in America. So he, morally,
Yeah.
I'm not commenting on morally. He was voted in, so that's fair enough. He's trying to get a certain outcome, so he says things to make you think about him or think about the thing he's talking about a certain way. One example would be people thought that he was being idiotic in arguing over the size of the crowds that attended his
Yes.
inauguration. Now, as soon as
Yes.
students of this concept of persuasion would say, rather that as if you start concentrated on the crowds, exactly how popular is he? You're not saying that he's unpopular. So it's a way of getting you to think the
Well,
way that
now
he wants to think.
here's a point I wanted to interject. He is somebody again. This is a really important point when doing a deal. You don't have to be popular
No.
to be able to do a deal, and that's a really golden rule because in society. So let's take, for example, if you wanted to join a social group or if you wanted to just be popular, you may not always get the deal you want, but you'll be very popular. However, in business, Donald Trump is somebody who's proven not to be very popular, but got his way. So it is a fine balance. And you have to still retain integrity, follow the law, and all those sort of things. But it is interesting how he really brings a divided community. Some people like him, and some people don't. But people do recognise that he is good at doing a deal.
Yes.
I wanted to sort of end on something here, which is there are a lot of deals that are going on around in the world, and it's really your advice, or perhaps maybe we're talking about the art of doing a deal and how to do a deal. We have Theresa May, poor Theresa May, who's had some bad luck in recent times. Perhaps decision-making hasn't been something which has gone very well in her favour recently on a number of levels. But one thing that is important is that she's got to go into a phase now where she's got to do a deal with the United Kingdom coming out of Europe. So what sort of tips should we give to Theresa May here in terms of now, in her current situation, somewhat fragile, some people may say, we're dealing with Donald Tusk and the European Union. Yeah. How do you do a deal with the European Union?
I think she can take on board the comments from the Mark and Pete show and Donald Trump, who knows something about it, and try and create an environment in which a positive outcome is assumed, or use the art of persuasion I was talking about, and get some people who've done some research, because persuasion is built on actual research, looking at how people react to certain ways of speaking, certain images they're shown, etc. So yes, use that. Why not use the expertise that exists there, and to use the Trump doctrine of thinking big, and the Mark and Pete doctrine of looking at the long game, I think would help. I think going big, as in go in for the biggest deal ask for the biggest deal you can possibly want, but be prepared to walk away. Be absolutely strong. Give the
yes,
I'll come back to that in a second. And also playing the long term means you don't want to go for immediate gains now. You want something that's going to help Britain in the long term. For example, one thing that you should not give up, I would say, let's just say something you don't want to give up, is the fishing rights to the seas of Britain. Because long term,
correct,
that as they stocks build back up again, you enforce that, you will be able to build up Britain's fishing industry, and that will be wonderful for communities around on the coast, and it will just transform certain areas of Britain and make you a very popular Prime Minister, Theresa, if you're listening. Now, so I'm just saying that would be a very good thing to do. Now, you don't want to give way on that, but there are some things you can give way on. So be strong on everything. So you only have to give way on the things that don't really matter. Don't let your opponent know what the things that you're going to give away on. And so you must be prepared
yes.
to say that you could walk away
well,
altogether.
It's like a game of cards, isn't it? You don't show your full hand.
Yes, exactly. Correct. No, just finally what I said about coming back to that point. I mean, I think that when Theresa May is going into this situation and she's saying, right, I'm going to have this, I'm looking for a deal. One of the things that she needs to have in place is her personal integrity. Now you may say, well, she doesn't have any. Well, she have to get some. She needs to be trusted by the British people, so she's got to start getting some backbone. Say, this is how I behave. This is what I believe in. It's almost like getting some charisma. She's got to, or getting some sort of steel in the spine. And I think that the only way to do that, this is my personal opinion, and I think, and I've seen this be borne out in many ways, is to turn back to God. Theresa May says she's a Christian. I've no reason to doubt it. Go back to God and trust in him, so that even if people trash you, even if people think you're awful, it doesn't matter if you're unpopular, as you've just said. Stick to these points and think big, play for the long game. Don't give way on the points that you mustn't give way on, and whatever you do, act with absolute integrity. That's my advice.
Correct. Yes. Excellent. No, very good. Well, listeners, I'm sure that you've got many other tips on how to do a deal, whether you've seen that in business or whether you've seen it in other walks of life. Why not drop us a line at Mark and Pete and follow us Twitter and give us your thoughts. We would love to read them out on the next show. Well, listeners, let's do a deal with you that we'll certainly build up our show, and we promise that we will act with integrity to bring you colourful conversations on the next show. So join us again. I will do you a deal next time on Mark and Pete.